I'm Joe Nye, and I'm going to turn this over to Neve King to moderate, but the reason I wanted to introduce this next panel is we're doing something different. When Brent Scowcroft and Bill Perry and I founded the Aspen Strategy Group 40 years ago, we wanted to get a situation where you could have real dialogue about strategy and security outside of the usual Washington hothouse. And that's why we founded in Aspen. We're back in the hothouse, but we are trying to do something new, which is to add a generational dimension. We would like to have you here, our leaders, our young leaders, rising leaders, so that you can get an idea of what Condi was just talking about, which is cutting across tribes politically and cutting across silos in terms of business, government, academia, and nonprofits. So Neve is going to introduce and moderate our rising leaders, and I think this is a perfect segue to what Condoleezza Rice was just talking about of what we need. So Neve, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much, Joe. And wait, we're missing one. There she is. I'm so proud and pleased to be on stage today with the Aspen Strategy Group inaugural class of rising leaders. And it's part of the vision that Joe talked with, that we wanted to add new voices, cross sectors to the foreign policy discussion. And lo and behold, we put out a call for applications. We had 225 applicants, and we whittled it down to 30. And here some of them are. The rest of them are also here. Alas, we are not in the Rocky Mountains. We're Aspen Strategy Group on the Potomac, but we'll get there next year. So I just wanted to introduce you guys to some of them. One of the parts of the program is that you have to write a policy paper. And what we were trying to do was encourage them to get together with other of their cohort that thought about things differently than they did or had a different perspective. And then to come up with a policy, because we think it's important to have these voices together. So down the end there, we have James Payne, who's at the Heritage Foundation. James wrote a paper about the Arctic, something people didn't think that much about, but James did, and his co-author is currently deployed in Alaska. Joshua Wolford, he'll be joining us tomorrow morning. He's coming in. James, why don't you tell us about the experience of you sitting here in a think tank inside the Beltway, and then you're communicating with our colleague in the Coast Guard that's up in Kodiak, Alaska, thinking about these issues differently. Over to you.
Neve. So it was really a unique experience. I've tracked the Coast Guard for the past several years, and working in a think tank on Capitol Hill, you look at the budgets. It's usually very kind of theoretical. You can kind of get a feel for the ground truth, but it's a little different from actually touching it. And obviously, as a civilian kind of academic, you don't have that kind of operational experience. So working with Josh was wonderful because I've tracked the Healy, like I said, for the past few years, but he's flown a helicopter off of the Healy during his time up in Alaska. So it was that blending of the kind of theoretical policy research that I've done with his direct operational experience in the real world, and it created a very unique work environment for the two of us. And we kind of agreed on the main kind of thrusts of the paper. The Arctic's a strategic environment. The U.S. needs to have leadership up there, and to have that leadership takes actual resources to be able to access the harsh environment up there. So our two perspectives, we kind of had the same goal in mind, but we came at it from two different ways, which was really great.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Now I'm going to move to two of our co-authors are together here on stage. We've got Mari Manoogian right there in the middle. She is a state representative from Michigan. I don't know which part of the mitten yours. Where are you on the mitten? She's down there.
Metro Detroit.
And she co-authored a piece with Tara Chandra, who is at UC Berkeley. She is finishing up her PhD up there. So, Mari, why don't you tell us what you guys wrote about, and then we'll dissect it a bit.
Yeah, so our paper examines how we can sort of move out of the ivory tower of folks who are typically recruited to be in the spaces that we're in right now, to make sure that we are really truly creating a foreign policy that is of the middle class and not just for the middle class. So folks who live in my district and in districts surrounding my district have, a real, really understand that they have a stake in our foreign policy decision making. And so what we've seen, I think Tara can speak to this as well, is really looking at how the impacts, for example, of climate change on some of the major flooding that has happened in Metro Detroit over the past summer, what we are seeing in the conversations that are happening overseas right now regarding climate change, how those have really serious impacts for the folks who live in districts like mine.
Have you upped the game in the state legislature with you coming back with all this fresh knowledge from the tie-dyed ivory tower over at UC Berkeley?
What I would say is I think we need more opportunities for folks who are in local and state elected office to engage with academics, with folks like all of you. So that way when we're creating policy, we have top-level research, we have had those conversations, and we need to do a better job of that. That's something that we need to invest in as state legislatures.
All right, so Tara, there you are sitting in California, the land of milk and honey. What did you see, thinking about your perspective? How do you think about how the academy can affect policy and how you can help somebody like Mari with her constituents and thinking about it?
Yeah, I think it was a wonderful work experience. Obviously, academia thinks about these questions very differently, and we're trained to think about causality and research design in a very specific way. And so really having the opportunity to work with someone who's sort of seeing the on-the-ground effects. Climate change in particular was a topic that was very salient for both of us. I grew up in South Florida, but I live in California, both places heavily affected by climate change. And I think there are a lot of people in academia thinking about how to do policy relevant work. And one of the things we sort of bring up in the paper is unique ways to kind of marry the resources of the US government with the training and tools and techniques that people in academia have, not just sort of moving beyond the model of just the government funding different types of